On October 8, 2018, Hurricane Michael underwent a 48-hour rapid intensification period where it went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane. By landfall on October 10, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Hurricane Michael was an unprecedented for the region Category 5 hurricane, making landfall near Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. Hurricane Michael was the strongest hurricane in recorded history to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle. Landing with sustained winds of 161 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 919 millibars, the storm was the fourth most powerful hurricane to hit the United States, spreading devastation far inland through many counties in northwestern Florida, from Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, even through Jackson County and Leon County, where the state capital is located. Hurricane Michael was unique in that it maintained its major hurricane status all the way through the Florida-Georgia state line. As it entered Seminole County, Georgia, it was still a strong Category 3 hurricane. Across northwestern Florida and into the state of Georgia, Hurricane Michael was responsible for $25 billion in damages. These are the 31 voices of Hurricane Michael, representing the many unique experiences and perspectives of the community members who endured the storm and its impacts. Voices of hope, empathy, pain, lessons learned, grit, determination, and extensive insight into one of the most catastrophic hurricane seasons the Florida Panhandle has ever encountered. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and allow me to introduce you to
meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and I'm here today with one of Hurricane Michael's voices, Miss Sonja Barber. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us today.
And thank you for doing this for us.
It is my pleasure. So right out the gate, I would like to just get a sense of how Panama City was home for you to begin with. Give us your story.
It is still home. I actually am a transplant from another state. I moved here in 91 and from a small area. So I was kind of concerned about moving to Panama City because it's a vacation tourist area. And I'm from a small town in Mississippi. But from the first day, I felt like I was at home. It's community. And that is something that was very important to me to be around. I met my husband here, who is an actual local, and we've been married for over 20 years. We've been together for 26 years, 26 years, and this is where we've raised our family. So it's important to me and feels like home because it is home.
And you are an actual local, by the way.
Yeah. They consider you, if you're a transplant, and you're local,
Yep. And it's definitely raising your family here and being here for almost 20 years, so over 20 years.
Right,
yeah, over 20 years.
Yeah.
You're a local.
Yeah.
So 2018 hurricane season rolls around. How are you feeling? Are you feeling prepared? What's that summer looking like leading up to October 10th, 2018 was landfall of Hurricane Michael?
To be honest with you, October 9th, we looked at the Weather Channel. We watched it, not like we normally do because we've survived hurricanes before in my husband's family's home as well as our home that we're in. When the storm hit, we actually decided to stay because our business here is dealing with tree removal. So we knew people would need us.
So you were an absolute asset.
Mm-hmm. And our family was here. My boys were here, and my oldest son's family was here. He's married with, at the time, a small infant daughter. So we figured, and we had 7 pets. So we knew relocating and leaving was not an option. So we watched the news. We really went to bed comfortable with it because we survived other storms. It really wasn't apparent how deadly it was until it was too late to leave.
Going to bed that night, I do remember that. It was not as dire as waking up.
No, and it was frightening because we realized it was going to be stronger than we thought. And we had prepared. We did some mild preparing for it. Not as prepared. I don't think anyone was prepared for Michael. I felt totally unprepared after the storm and during the storm. But going to bed that night, I felt a sense of comfort. I won't say peace because I was nervous.
Most people did.
The day of the storm, we got up, we did our normal routine, we got all of our important documentations close by, with the exception of some paperwork that was on my desk at the back door.
Yep.
And the little office I had, that was my son's college information.
No.
It's okay.
Tell him
But
he's got to do college all over again.
well, he was a high school senior, so
Okay.
and he's going to college. He starts Monday, so I'm excited for him.
Congratulations.
But we just had a sense of everything's going to be okay until October 10th at 10:30 a.m. And that's when we knew it wasn't going to be okay.
And at that point, you can't get on the roads.
Mm-mm.
You can't be out in it when it's moving over. It's just best to stay hunkered down.
Yeah, and right before the total impact of the storm, Panama City had a lot of water, rain, and the grounds were wet. And that morning when we went to do a little impromptu recording, as you do before a storm, we were upstairs, my husband and I, we heard like a train whistle. Like, it sounded literally like a train whistle. And I've been in tornadoes, and I thought,
Oh, yes.
I told my husband, I said, that's not good. We need to get downstairs and move the kids into the center of the heart of the home where we thought was safe. And no sooner than 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, it was there in our home. It ripped out.
Now, this is the eyes moving over.
This is the direct impact from the edge of the storm coming in. And I can't describe it because everybody has that description, but you're totally not prepared for that. All I remember is right before it hit us, I told the kids to move the baby into the room, and my youngest son, he went and gathered as many of the pets as we could, and we sat down, and no sooner than that, the windows were ripped off of our home, sucked outward. The back door was sucked off, and part of our roof was gone.
And through that experience, we were talking pre-interview, you incurred
damage to my ear from the pressure. I will say I have hearing loss, but it's a struggle. It's like a throbbing sensation of it's like you're underwater.
Yeah.
And that day, I mean, it was like a cluster. You don't know what to do when it happens, but you calm down a little during it just to get your wits about yourself. You're not calm, but we knew we needed to go in the center of the home in the bathroom under the stairway. One went one way to get the rest of the pets. My daughter-in-law went with the baby inside the room. My oldest son and my husband went to see what was going on in the home.
Yeah.
And all I could do was stand between my daughter-in-law in that bathroom and the front door while it shook.
Yeah, I can
and just
imagine.
pray to God for mercy. And for over an hour, that's where we stood.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah.
For over an hour.
Yeah. It was scary as the room started falling apart. We knew it was no longer a safe room. We were contemplating when the second part of the roof blew what we were going to do as we felt our home shaking under our hands.
Yeah.
Where we were going to move in the home, because my husband shared with me later he thought about going out to the truck, but it was too late by then.
Yeah.
And I'm thanking God we didn't.
Yes. Some families did, and in most cases you don't want to do that.
Right.
Some families didn't have a choice. But if you don't have to do it, like in your case, it is definitely always better that you don't.
It was in the back of his mind to do it because he thought that was the only.
We were not the only family. Yeah,
really?
No, even my family. They had that moment, that 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Do we need to just run out into the storm and face what we're going to face, or stay in the structure that may?
Right.
But you were not alone in that as well. And so that was actually an interesting thing. It just occurred to me as you're talking. You're holding on in those moments of your house breathing around you, the walls shaking for an hour. And when you hear about storm stories and tornado stories, it's very quick and intense. But with a storm this big, you're in that massively intense moment for an hour or over an hour in some people's cases. And that's I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So then you're immediately emerging from the storm, and it's the day of. What was that like?
We actually point back a little bit, then I'll get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We had to flee where we were to go to another part of the home.
Oh, okay.
With everyone.
So safe room
and we were
stopped being
right.
safe.
It was no longer safe. So we actually figured out the one room we had renovated a few years before was a safe room. We immediately moved all the furniture in front of the doors and windows in that room. It was a Florida room, but still they shook.
Yeah.
I remember prior to that moment of trying to discover what we were going to do, very little do I remember about that day, but flashbacks come. I think it's PTSD.
Very
I'm not self-diagnosing, but I'm pretty sure all of us have a little bit of that. if not a lot.
I don't think that's a very off-base self-diagnosis,
Yeah.
even if you are self-diagnosing. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah, I finally determined there's no shame in having
No,
it, and I
not
will
at
not
all.
deny it. But I remember walking into we have a galley kitchen that leads to the Florida room, and it was dark. All the power was gone. And it's dark in that central area because there's only one window that leads to the Florida room, and that's where the light comes from.
Yeah.
The winds and rains, when all the windows and doors were gone, just come in. I mean, and it was like you're living in the midst of a horrible nightmare you can't get out of, and you don't know which way to turn. But my husband said he saw me on the ground trying to grab my son's college application stuff. I don't remember that.
Your brain was likely holding on to a sense of normalcy.
I don't
Your
remember
brain
doing
in
that.
that trauma was like, ooh, normal. I need to,
Yep.
let's preserve this.
Yeah.
You were thinking after the storm.
I
and
guess it
that's
was just a
pretty-
way of adapting
That's
to
amazing.
stress
That was
dealing.
just probably a survival tactic.
Don't remember, and I just kept telling him. He said I kept saying I need the papers, grab his papers, and I don't remember it. I remember he went one way. He said get into the room, and he found that Florida room was safe. And I just stood at the back door. He said I stood there forever, between the front window where it was broken out and that room, looking out the back door. I remember seeing nothing but white.
Yeah.
It was like striations of white. You couldn't, like a snowstorm.
Yeah.
You couldn't, and the sounds were just unbearable. You couldn't hear anything around you. But just seeing that white, the magnificent power of that storm. We think about all the catastrophe it brought, but it's a monster.
Yeah.
At that point, I started remembering that the next thing I remember is holding my granddaughter in that room. And that the children and my husband we had a brief moment when the eye actually came over, where there's a calm, which people, I don't know if they understand about hurricanes. They go one way when they come to shore.
Yep.
The eye passes over. Well, it's
The
reversed
winds are going
the other way.
direction.
We witnessed that. It was unreal. Before about 30 to 45 minutes, we were in that. And we stayed in that room until it was over. And then, leading back to your question, it was like the most beautiful calm.
Mm-hmm. Well, the calm after the storm.
After
I guess
the storm.
That's a trope for a reason.
You walk out and there's devastation everywhere, and you're praying your neighbors are okay.
Yeah.
You're thanking God that you're okay and your family is okay. Then you sense a little bit of a guilt about it because you don't know if your loved ones that are in the area are okay. You don't know if your elderly neighbor that's next door that's a widow is okay. You don't know if anyone's okay because it's like a quiet, an eerie quiet and calm and a breeze blowing that I can't describe.
Yeah.
It's almost like experiencing a nightmare, waking up to realizing it's not a nightmare. It is a nightmare. It's not real.
Yeah, yeah.
But this case, it was real.
Yeah. That flood of complete contrast to what you were just going through.
Right.
Complete night and day.
Right.
Gives you, and it probably amplifies that natural physical quietness. But in you or personally, knowing what was just happening before, that's probably amplifying the quietness and the calm.
And it was just bizarre.
Yeah.
It was the eeriest calm I've ever experienced, and I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
But it was a nice calm.
You probably needed it.
So it was
Very,
over.
very much.
So, but then it was the processing of what had happened.
Yeah.
The weeks and months of still living that nightmare when storms come around. Because we were in a camper, we lost our home totally to the destruction of the storm. It just destroyed our home. It's condemned.
Now the home was a loss almost right out the gate.
Yes.
You weren't living in it the 2 days after the storm.
Well, we did. We had to.
Well, yeah.
We had one room that we thought we could stay in until we got insurance adjusters there.
Yeah.
It took ours a little bit longer for whatever reason, but I won't discuss that. But being that we had nowhere to go because we didn't have an RV, my husband refused to put us in a tent because he had to go to work every day. I mean, he was working from that day of the storm. He started working, cutting our neighbors out and cutting our own trees out and helping people. And he knew he was gonna, but he tried to. My husband was a great, just my hero. He immediately, when we got some phone service, it was like you're living in an apocalyptic movie.
Yep.
You don't have power, you don't have water, you don't have resources to even, go anywhere because the roads are trapped. with trees, huge trees on them that you can't just get
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
But
And the business that you guys own
Mhm.
was actually is a tree removal
Right,
service. So
right.
immediate asset to the
Right.
area as soon as this is through.
Right.
And so you said he had to get to work immediately.
Right.
And I'm sure that was not easy for him as a provider alongside you
Well,
to yeah, I
Yeah.
can't imagine the strength that took.
well, his our lot is right about a mile from our home, and when we finally, I think it was day 2 or 3, we finally got to get out to see if his equipment made it.
Yeah.
2 of his trucks were majorly damaged. The building that covered them it looked like it took it and squeezed the truck. It just wrapped around the truck. The trusses on it
Yeah.
it was the weirdest thing ever.
Interesting. Like it imploded.
Yeah, like it just wrapped around that truck, and he had to take another piece of equipment and get that off of his truck.
Oh no.
And it turned over the power of that storm. I mean, everybody talks about it. Turned over a 2-ton trailer like it was paper. And when we got there, we were like, wow. And our emergency lights on our trucks were blinking.
No. We
Yeah.
those worked.
Yeah. And we were like, well, we're just hoping that they work so we can help people and we
Yeah.
can help our families. And because we had a 90-something-year-old grandmother that was in a home, a little small home with trees, surrounded by trees.
Oh no.
We couldn't get a hold of her, couldn't get to her. But when we got in the vehicle, when our neighbors and us could survey,
Yeah.
she was one of the first ones and she was fine.
Oh,
We're very
I'm glad to hear
grateful.
that.
But yes, he went straight to work, and he ended up having friends that helped him work, and they needed a job too, and a couple of them had equipment that they brought, and they worked to help people, and I was very grateful for that.
You know, that is something interesting that you do bring to the table. When I was studying in Tallahassee, witnessing everybody post-storm have to just go back to work. It's hard to imagine being at the center. And then the same thing applies. If you have a job that can be utilized post-storm immediately, you've survived the storm that day, and then you're going to work within days. That is unimaginable. But
And he did,
right on the day.
and it was, you as a wife of someone doing that, like our military reserves, you do what you go into a survival mode, I guess is the lack of a better term. You do what you have to do to get to the next day.
Yep.
We used propane. We actually stocked up with some propane. We used our grill, and neighbors I had never met before became a safe haven. Their homes manageably did well. For whatever reason, ours, I think, protected theirs, so I felt grateful for that.
Aw.
I felt grateful for that.
That's such a nice silver
I was
lining.
like, it's my home, the 2-story home that towers, over
Yeah.
these. I'm thankful if anything of that happened
so
for them.
sweet.
But we met great neighbors. I mean, 3 of our neighbors right off the bat that we stayed. I don't know if anybody else stayed, but those 3 little neighbors,
Yeah.
a couple and another lady in the front, we just came together
Yeah.
and had, we sat out and watched the stars at night. And, it became not so much focus on what we had to do to fix everything. It became what we had to do to get through the next day as a unit and as together. And I just, when my husband's guys came in to work, the other ones did, I did what I could. I got cereal and milk out for him when we got to get some cereal milk. Or I would just put out granola bars we had in the house that survived the storm so they can have at least something to eat to go to work. But you have a sense of worth and thankfulness that you didn't have before that storm hit. Little things that were so big and worrisome weren't so being worrisome anymore.
And forming relationships
Mm-hmm.
in that scenario, I think, is an interesting experience in that the societal constructs, like you were saying, the conveniences of society were not there. You didn't have things that we take for granted that allow us to live under the societal rules and social rules of society were gone. So you're in this adapting, surviving, and you're interacting with the person next to you in a setting that probably allowed you so much more freedom or like a different way to connect with someone.
Right.
And I think that's really unique that you guys banded together in that way, just so immediately out the gate.
Yes, we did. And I'm thankful for them. And we had friends at the opposite end of our road that came down and that just were amazing. They hooked up our well. We were able to have water. Excuse me.
You're okay?
We had a deep freezer that we could hook up to a generator, and we invited, if you have food for these neighbors, put it in our,
Yeah.
by all means, put it in our freezer. We'll do the best we can. I'm just so grateful I got to know them, and I mean, they were amazing. I don't know what I would have done without them.
And I am sure there are so many. I mentioned silver linings to the disaster for us to hold on to, I wish the cosmos would allow us a way to not have those silver linings, in the sense the storm never happens.
Right.
But since it did happen, there are definitely silver linings that it seems like you are holding on to, and that is very important. And so you're forming these relationships. You're trying to rebuild right out the gate. Now, the few weeks post-storm, what is that looking like for you?
Honestly,
Is it just kind of, is it very slow? Or maybe the better question is a couple months after the storm,
Right.
because the few weeks were probably just the same.
It
Little
was.
baby steps every single day.
It's still scary.
Yeah.
We were able to get an RV. It's called a
That's
toy
good.
hauler to live in. But you still have an overwhelming sense of guilt seeing people in tents.
Yeah.
It took me months to grasp that our home was gone. So at the moment of the 2 months right after the storm, I just had to adapt of getting a place for my son and his wife and child. And then right after the storm, she's pregnant. So they have another baby on the way. So it was like, and my son that's graduating, I had to get him through high school. And he suffered a lot of stress that his friends don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't think unless you were here.
Yep.
And he processes it differently. And he felt isolated and alone. And I didn't know that till after the storm, after he graduated. But he's great. He and his brother both were just amazing during the storm. But my oldest one had to think about his little family.
Yeah.
So it was, my son graduated with honors, high honors. So I'm very grateful for him. He started focusing on what was ahead of him rather than what was behind
This
him.
is the high schools.
Mm.
That is
He's-
so amazing.
he-
Honors.
He
in the face
did.
of all of that.
He did. He graduated with over 4.0.
What?
hmm And with college classes and dual enrolled. And I was very proud of him. He started focusing on priorities
Yeah.
and what he needed to do to get to college and
Yeah.
setting goals for that. And I think that kept him sane
Grounded.
and grounded.
Yeah.
So that alone I was thankful for, because I felt like, when you're in the midst of this, you feel like you have to do more,
Yeah.
but you wonder what can you do to make it better for them, and you try.
But he instinctively out
Yep,
the gate,
he did.
intuitively was just grasping coping mechanisms that were good
Right.
for his adaptation and survival. That's amazing.
In his school,
That's something you can't teach some people.
and I was very blessed. I mean, that was both of them. I was very thankful for them in that moment, because there were times I thought I was not being the greatest mother because I didn't know what to do to help them, because there's really nothing you can prepare to do to help your child through a catastrophe. You comfort them,
And
you
it's-
encourage them, but
It sounds like to me that he had the capacity to do what he did. He didn't do that alone. He did it because you were a good mother.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So your kids are graduating, you're rebuilding, you're in an RV, which I know that's such a thin slice between you and the atmosphere around you. So I know that's been rough for my family as well, feeling that like you're dealing with your post-traumatic stress with storms. And you're still in the RV?
We will be in the RV. We don't know when we'll be out of the RV. We're still in a struggle with a tug of war, like so many are in this area, with insurance claims and trying to process that, when we can tear down and rebuild, when are they going to pay off so we can do that.
Yeah.
But we're thankful for an RV.
Yes.
Um,
And I want to pivot back to when you said you were feeling guilty being in an RV when there are people in tents, but at the same time, I don't think it's not going to stop you from feeling
Right.
guilty. But I don't feel like you should feel guilty, because it's going to take everybody getting to a good place themselves to help others.
Right.
So the people that can help themselves, you have to help yourself to help someone else.
Right.
So you're getting yourself to a better place so that you can be stronger for the community.
Right.
And everybody doing that, it's going to take everybody doing that to get
I
the people
agree.
out of the tents eventually.
I agree. And I even went down and helped with the tent city here a few times, and it was just so hard to grasp. There were other people that were less fortunate than we are, and the least I could do was go down there and help.
Yep.
And it was just a blessing to do so. But it's just also heartbreaking, and it makes you very thankful for what you do have.
Yep.
And it makes you reprocess of you have a whole reprocessing of your thinking of the way things are versus what you want them to be. And
Yeah.
before the storm, I was very OCD. very controlling.
Yeah.
After the storm, not so much, because
Interesting silver lining.
I try, of course my kids will tell you differently,
Yeah.
but it's like you don't have that sense of worry that you did before the storm, because you know there's other things to process and deal with.
Speaking of perspective, what have you done post-storm to give yourself an emotionally coping tool did you use?
Journal.
Yeah.
At first I wasn't talking to my family before. I try not to talk a lot. I have a best friend in Texas and my sister-in-law here. There were days that all she would do was walk in and I would just cry, and vice versa. But journaling has helped me.
So powerful. I swear by journaling myself.
Reading, doing a daily devotional every morning with drinking coffee.
Yeah.
You know, trying to have
Another one I swear by.
Yeah. Try to do those things you did before the storm that helped you.
Yeah.
And then and just use those same tools as a way to deal.
Yeah.
Like you said, but
you took a drive too.
Oh, I did.
Tell me about that.
There was one day I think I'd reached my max capacity of dealing with everything. It was a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and I just said, I'm going to Mexico Beach. I needed humility, and even though I was dealing with it, it was just so. I think it was in December actually.
Yeah.
It was in January. We had gotten some not terrific news from our insurance company, and I think that point is when I thought I had it all together, and I didn't. And so in January, February is when they released it for you to go into Mexico Beach. It might have even been March. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But whenever they released it, it was a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that.
Yeah.
I just had a bad day. And everything just kept compiling. And I said, I'm getting in my car and I'm driving. I'm going to Mexico Beach because I used to love going to Mexico Beach.
Yep.
My husband and I would go to Toucans there. And my kids have been to Toucans there. I've taken family to Toucans. In fact, the year before, my cousin and my aunt visited here, took them to Mexico Beach, and we walked by, I think, the El Governor, the little pathway down to the beach there. And I just wanted to go.
Yeah.
Not to see the destruction like a lot of tourists do. I just needed a place that was peaceful and quiet, and I knew for whatever reason that would be where it was. About halfway into Tyndall, I just lost it. Yeah. It wasn't a feeling of dread. It was a sense of, sadness. Yeah. But I think I needed that. Yeah. I parked adjacent to the old Governor, right smack down from Toucans, and I parked in it looked like an abandoned shop. Yeah. There was a upside down flag that had flown and stuck upside down. I remember focusing on that and trying to focus on breathing and just listen to the waves. Yeah. The beaches were gone. Yeah. The landscape had changed, but the peace was still there. Yeah. And got a perspective that everything's going to be okay. Yeah. I had actually, I'm a Christian, I prayed, and I said, I just need to find God that everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And a lady walked by. She was walking. She had an iPad on or something, and she just looked at me and smiled and waved. Aww. And I said, okay.
The community survived.
I said, that's my sign. Yeah. And I said, everything's going to be okay.
And one of the things in Mexico Beach I noticed when I was going through there as well is there was a lot of sheets of immediacy after the storm of we will be back. Mm-hmm. And that's something to hold on to. We will be back.
And there's signs there that say that. Yeah. And I mean, the landscape has changed. It's catastrophic, of course, but the spirit in that little community is the same. Yeah. They're broken, but they're not beaten down, and they're going to be okay. And I felt that too when I left there. I said, everything's going to be okay.
You went home with that.
I did. I took that home with me.
That perspective.
And I shared that with my husband. I said, sorry.
No, you're okay.
I said, everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And I haven't felt that upset since then, thank goodness, because it was pretty bad.
And like most stressful events in our life and processing, you'll probably have waves, to be like sinusoidal. And sometimes it's okay to feel at the very bottom of that curve and to feel that weight, and that is absolutely okay. And it sounds like you have an intuitive sense about you as well of what will help you emotionally through coping mechanisms that you've obviously passed on to your children. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be because of community members like yourself that we will be back.
Right.
Like, absolutely.
I think of it too as the stages of grief.
Yeah.
How you go through the waves of that, and everybody feels it because we are grieving. Yeah. We're grieving the loss of our homes, we're grieving the loss of a community just in this area alone, driving here. Buildings that I've been into and my children have since they were little are gone. And you have the memories, but it's still a grieving process.
And it's not like in a moment in your life that you process post moment with all the reminders of the moment physically out of your space. Everybody here and what you're going through, you are living in it. You're still swimming in it. You're driving in it. You're working in it. So that can alter your grieving process. I can't imagine so many different ways than natural, like normal grieving as well. So what you're going through is very, very powerful of you to have gotten through as far as you have.
And with you saying that, I'm a nurse, so I swear nurses think differently.
My mom was a nurse.
Yeah.
I love nursing.
I worked in the emergency room here at Bay Medical for years.
Yeah.
You think differently. You're trained to think differently because you have to focus on other things in a moment and then move on to the next moment. I think that has helped me because things I take for granted, trees, before the storm, the landscape's changed forever. I didn't realize how powerful that aspect was for me because I know as an adult they're broken. Hopefully they'll grow back. It may take about 10 to 15. But for my 18-year-old, it was killing him to see the landscape so broken. He said, "They're gone, Mom." And when he said that in that moment, I thought, he's right, they are. But his processing is not the same.
He doesn't have the as wider scale of perspective to see. I mean, to him, like as children, it's the four walls around you. That's all you know. That's your world. And then as a teenager, it's your town, it's your trees. You don't have that big picture that you have as an adult and a trained nurse to see the bigger picture.
And some of his friends had to move away because they didn't have a home. They commuted back and forth. Some moved away and didn't come back. And then he's left here. And I thought, and he and I both thought this, what about the other people feeling like he does? He was like taking that worry on. I said, you can't worry about that. You gotta, I encouraged him to encourage his friends and him. If you have a day at school, you just don't feel like it, go talk to your counselors. Don't take them for granted.
It's okay to ask for help.
And go talk to them and just tell them, I'm just having a bad day. Can I sit here for a little bit? And in community, our schools have been amazing. When the ones that have reopened, some unfortunately won't ever reopen again. So I'm very, very blessed again about our community coming back together. Michael might have taken structures, but he didn't take the structure.
Yes.
Of our community. So anything to encourage.
Something to hold on to.
You got to hold on to that. You do. You got to hold on.
And eventually, we won't say new norm.
You know how I feel about that.
We'll say new norm. Eventually, hopefully in the next, I know it's going to be a long process, it'll be years, but with a community that we have and with community members like yourself, we'll get to a place where it will feel like home to the people we're going to be raising and to the people we're going to be bringing in to visit and show around. And it's going to take us building that home back.
I agree with you.
I think with people like yourself, we can do that.
Absolutely. Home is not necessarily a place, it's a feeling. And I feel like Panama City, again, back to why I love it here. It's a feeling. Home is a feeling. Your home may be gone, it's the four walls, but it's what happened within those four walls that will take you through it. You've got to hold on to that as an encouragement. It's helped me. My family, I think they're afraid to ask me questions because they don't know how to approach me. They think they may, and I've encouraged them, if you want to know stuff, ask. I may cry a little bit, but just know
that's we all do.
Yeah, and but it's just opening yourself and realizing that you can get through another day. And I think that alone can encourage people too. It's hard, but nothing worth fighting for is easy. Ever. So.
Well, Miss Sonja Barber, thank you so much for speaking with us today, contributing to the project. She is the voice of Hurricane Michael, one of the many voices, and it's just even what you brought to the table today with your coping mechanisms, and that's what this is about. And it's going to be people like Sonja Barber that put our home back together And we won't say new norm.
No, just structurally sound
Structurally sound home
Yes.
will be rebuilt with people like her.
in our community, yes.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much for doing this too.
Thank you.